Hello, I'm Ryan Leeming, and today I'm going to talk about how I pack my backpack.
Having a well-packed backpack makes heavy loads seem much lighter, and similarly, having a poorly packed backpack exaggerates heavy loads and will be very uncomfortable. This discomfort can make it hard to enjoy the best parts of the outdoors, making it important to develop a consistent strategy for packing your gear. As a basic outline, gear should be packed with weight distribution and accessibility in mind. Heavy items should be close to your body and midway up your back, while lighter, more compressible items should fill up the gaps. Keep items that you frequently use accessible, so you don't have to completely unpack and repack every time you need a warmer layer or a drink of water, and put things you won't need until you get to camp in hard to access places.
Alright, so when I'm laying stuff out, I like to kind of organize it by the order it's going to go into my pack. So I kind of have a good map for what's going to go in when. So starting over here, this is the stuff that either goes at the bottom or needs to go in first. So that'll be stuff that you kind of don't need until you get to camp, or will kind of be very inaccessible throughout the day. So, first aid kit, always something very important. I like to put this, for me, in my backpack at the very bottom. I actually have a zipper that lets me access that kind of whenever I want to, so it's not taking up good kind of space for stuff that needs to go in and be accessible, but yet still stays accessible, so I put that at the bottom. After my first aid kit, I like to have a hydro bladder in my bag, so I'm just going to kind of put that in now and wire it all up. It's a lot easier to do toward the beginning, or else your bag will be full and it'll be pretty much impossible to actually get this thing in there. Most bags will have some sort of clip system, and then a separate kind of hole for the actual tube to go through. Just go ahead and connect that. Then I'll just take my hose. Alright, perfect. Next I'm going to do my sleeping bag. Generally it's a good idea to store them in a big bag like this, doesn't kind of constrict them down too much, just to not keep the down compressed when it's stored. But when you're packing it, it's generally a good idea to put it in a stuff sack of some sort. Something else you can do, if you're really worried about it getting wet, is take a garbage bag and just kind of line the inside of your stuff sack with that. Good way to keep everything dry. This is especially important if you have a down sleeping bag, or you're worried about super rainy conditions. But I just want to get that all stuffed and packed. Alright, so now that that is all compressed down into a much smaller little ball, just kind of put that right in the bottom. Then I'll move on to a tent. Again, these will generally come in a pretty big bag, but this is not what we want to put in there. The best way of doing this is to kind of separate your tent into all its little components. I'm actually going to take the rain fly and put it over here, and I'll talk about why that is later. You take the tent itself, just kind of shove that in the bottom of your bag as well. You really want to make sure everything is kind of as compacted together as possible, so you don't have all this weird wasted space filling up your bag. I'm going to take the poles and just shove them right down the side. Again, try to fill up small spaces left by your sleeping bag or your tent or any other pieces. Kind of take the stakes, just kind of shove them down in there too. the next thing I will put in is generally the tent isn't going to fill up as much space as your sleeping bag, so you can kind of fill up all that extra space with water filter, stove, other cooking stuff that you're not going to need until later in the day. And as far as clothing goes, there's kind of two different options, and each have their kind of merits, and you can decide what you like. One option is to use all of the individual pieces of clothing to fill up all the extra space left by things in your bag. This is nice for really getting everything as compact as possible, but everything is just kind of spread all over the place. So another option, if you don't really need every little bit of space, is to put all of your clothing in its own compression stuff sack. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. Alright, so as you can see, that really gets everything into a nice compact ball of clothing and keeps it all kind of organized together. Again, if you're really pressed for space, you can really just shove every individual piece of clothing into all the cracks left by other gear. But I'm actually going to wait to put that in, and this is a food bag. Kind of want all the heavier things. This will really be the majority of your weight. Right toward the middle of your back. You really don't want that all right at the bottom. Kind of right in the middle is the best place for that. So let's put that in next. And then follow that with all of my clothing. Alright, so that about wraps up all the things that I will not really need until camp. So moving on to all this other stuff, we're going to talk about why we want to leave it a bit more accessible. So I like to always have rain gear, so rain jacket, rain pants, all of that kind of stuff, as well as an extra warm layer, so any sort of like fleece or insulated jacket, and as well as like a hat, gloves, you know, anything that you can really put on if it gets cold, so you don't have to dig through your bag. I like to keep that right at the top, just so it's super accessible. Now we're going to talk about this thing. This is just a packing cube that I fill with all my little odds and ends so they don't get misplaced. I love this thing just because it's super easy to grab whenever you know that you need anything in here. So I would put something like a headlamp, sunscreen, kind of some chapstick, Blistex stuff, extra batteries, in a waterproof thing, so a Ziploc bag or little plastic case that they come in. Tea, in case the group doesn't bring more. Always keep some sort of emergency snack, but any snacks can go in there as well. Toothbrush, toothpaste, pen is always nice, never know you need one of those. Lighter, always good. I also have another one of these in my first aid kit as well. Map, always nice as well. Pocket knife, spork, and then just some lotion. So all of that really just fits really nicely in here. What I'm going to do with that is actually put it in this top pocket here. All of this can also just go right in the top of my bag as well, but if I need anything in here, I like not having to completely open up my bag all the way to get to it. Alright, so we're going to focus on these last few things here. Most of this stuff needs to stay relatively accessible or just kind of goes well on the outside of my pack. So if I get this all closed up here, I like to have this my little eating bowl, kind of accessible. It's nice that if we stop on the side of the trail with a big bag of trail mix, that I don't just have to have it in my hands or pull out of the bag. So it's just nice for me to kind of pull this out and fill it with whatever we're eating on the go. So I like to just kind of shove that right in the front. And then also my Lucy-Lite just kind of fits nicely here as well. Alright. Berry spray always needs to be kept accessible, so that will go right in the water bottle pocket with another water bottle. Always good to make sure you have some sort of actual water bottle. I do have a bladder, but bottles are super necessary too. This is my little setup for any sort of like tea or hot chocolate in the afternoon. It's nice to have a separate thing for that. Shove that in a water bottle pocket as well. And then I'm going to take my camp shoes / water shoes. These should be accessible just in case you have any sort of like creek crossing that you don't want to get your hiking boots or normal hiking shoes wet in. I put these just kind of right in this big top pocket here. Alright, lots of people will kind of strap those to the outside of their pack or have different ways of putting those in, but that's where I like to put them. And then, last but not least, I like having a foam sleeping pad. If I had an inflatable one, that would just kind of go right in the bottom with my sleeping bag. But it's really nice to just kind of sit on whenever you want. I'm lazy, I don't like inflating my own. But rainfly is going to get wet. If it's not wet, again, you can just kind of shove it with your tent. But once it gets wet, you really don't want that with everything else in your bag, getting everything else wet and just making everything a wet mess. So with tarps or rain flies or anything like that, I like to put those on the outside of my sleeping or my pack. And the way that I've kind of found that works with that is just kind of rolling up my pad in the tarp or the rain fly. Kind of fold it so it's a little bit more the same size, but then I'll just kind of roll the whole thing up. And strap it to the bottom of my bag here. Alright, that about does it. Last couple of things I'm going to talk about here are some extra little bits and bobs. A lot of packs have some sort of straps on the side that you can tighten down, get rid of any kind of weird bulges, make sure everything is nice and compressed. And then with these last two pockets on the hip belt here that most bags have, I usually just always have a bear bow in one of them, but it can get kind of a bit annoying, so it's nice to have somewhere to put it. My phone, which kind of doubles as a camera, I'll also just shove in one of these pockets here, just to keep that accessible. Usually kind of put a granola bar or some sort of snack in the other one, just something else that I like to keep accessible. But yeah, that about does it. This is definitely not a ultralight setup by any means, but kind of has always worked for me, especially just on shorter trips where weight isn't the biggest concern ever. But yeah. So yeah, that about does it. This is how I pack my backpack. Everybody kind of has their own little things that they do with it, but hope everybody learned something or had a good time watching, and I hope to see everybody in excursions or woot trips in the future.